Talk. Talk. Talk to me Tuesday. Welcome to Talk to Me Tuesday on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Madi B. And today we want to welcome you back to our second episode of the Sexual Abuse Human Trafficking series. Last month we spoke to Attorney Rochelle Guyton. So welcome back to the show, Attorney Rochelle.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, it's such a pleasure to have you back on the show. It's going to be a great show to really educate our viewers currently today. So last time, and we're going to kind of dive in right on to the show, we spoke about defining sexual abuse in detail, as well as giving various examples on what is considered sexual abuse. Now, human trafficking attorney Rochelle Guyton is with us to kind of uncover a little bit more of those topics on sexual abuse, how to get help, which is today's episode. So we will still have those lines of communication open as we want to encourage you to share your story, your experience. If you want to know more or just help someone that you know, we definitely want to welcome you on this show to share your story. So Attorney Rochelle Guyton, tell us a little bit about your background in sexual abuse and how have you created a huge network on seeking help for our survivors?
Absolutely. So, of course, like you said, I am a sexual abuse litigation attorney here at D. Miller and Associates. And prior to that, I had been working in several different aspects of the sexual abuse and child exploitation at the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. I'd done that for almost 10 years and just worked in various different avenues. I worked at the Children's Advocacy Center where I had prosecuted for sexual abuse of children under 10. I also worked on sexual abuse of adults. And then as the chief of the Child Exploitation Division, I worked both on child pornography, online solicitation of a minor, and then, of course, human trafficking of both adults and minors.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that has given me very wide range of network through my law enforcement experience and then now, of course, through my civil work.
That's awesome. And we're going to kind of uncover some of those experiences that you have on seeking help from the criminal side to the civil side. So with this series, I do want to let you guys know who are watching, our viewers. With this series, we hope that we can educate and answer as many questions as we can in our profession. If it's something outside of our profession, then we will definitely advise to go and seek that type of help. Throughout the show, if you have any questions, Attorney Rochelle Guyton is here to answer it the best that she can. So this episode in particular will focus on different types of safety and help. I think this is very, very important because a lot of people that are watching right now may just be asking, what is it? And then some may be asking, how can I get help? So Attorney Rochelle Guyton, last month in our first episode, you mentioned on what is human trafficking and what is sexual abuse. And also uncovering what sexual abuse survivors and abusers look like, feel like, all of that good stuff, as well as leading signs. So give us a brief description of last month's show.
Sure. So sexual abuse, it can come in various degrees of abuse. So what I would start to explain is that for the most part, it would mean that someone is forced to have sexual intercourse, has been penetrated by a sexual organ, and that they didn't consent to it. That's why I use the word force. So it could, when I say it comes in varying degrees, it could also include fondling, touching of private areas, breast and genitalia. And maybe I should warn whoever is watching that, sometimes talking about this, even though it's not fun, right, to use some of this terminology, but it can get kind of graphic. So I would want to just kind of caution anyone who's watching to make sure that if there are any kiddos around, that they be prepared to educate them about what we're talking about. And actually, I think that is something we should talk about in the show. Just I think educating our kids and adults are part of having a good safety plan.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
but just to kind of get back to your question, sexual abuse would be a form of sexual intercourse without consent of that person, or if they're a minor, depending on what state they're in, that if they're a minor and typically under the age of 18, they cannot consent to sexual intercourse. So any form of that would be sexual assault. Human trafficking can come in different forms as well, and I believe that the law allows a very broad definition of human trafficking, but very, I guess, kind of short, scaled down way to talk about it would be that it is in a form of service, labor, sexual, commercial acts that are when someone is forced, fraud, or coerced into doing those acts. If it's a child, of course, again, children can't consent to those acts, and so you don't have to prove the force, fraud, or coercion portion of that. But yeah, we did talk about what perpetrators look like. And, to sum it up, there is no look of a perpetrator. It can be your neighbor, your pastor. It could be your Boy Scout leader. It could be an uncle, a cousin. There is no specific look. And in fact, the reason that it's so dangerous that there's no look is that it's just simply people that we provide access to us as adults and to children. And once they have that access, they can start with their manipulation, power, control, the grooming aspects, and then force people into situations that they don't want to find themselves in.
Now, that's a great brief description of our first episode. I do want to, if you guys want to know more, we really uncovered and got deep into the definition of sexual abuse, of human trafficking, on what those roles are, just so that we can educate you guys. So my strong suggestion, if you haven't watched the episode, please make sure to go catch that episode so that you can kind of see a lot of the good points that we mentioned. We'll put the link of that show on the comment section here, so that way you guys have a quick, easy access, click and a link to straight to episode 1. So now that we've covered that, which is at episode 1, preliminary, what is sexual abuse? Now we want to transition into what is the process of transitioning a sexual abuse survivor into getting them the proper safety. So let's go ahead and uncover and start off with, shelter and all of that good stuff. I'm going to ask you, Attorney Rochelle, how hard can it be to escape their sexual abuse environment?
I think it's extremely difficult. And in some situations, I could very well imagine that survivors are feeling hopeless and helpless in their situations. They're not always in a place where they can pick up the phone and easily call someone without their perpetrator seeing, hearing, and then thereafter causing them harm. So, I very easily can see that survivors are in very detrimental situations. And so I think that, when we talk about this, the biggest thing that we can push for and hope for is that they have a safety plan, that they have a plan in place when those scenarios come up, that they can escape.
Yeah, for sure. A plan of action. And we're going to definitely help uncover some of those things for you guys to think of in a plan of action. Or if you are not the person that is sexually abused, and maybe you are someone that's uncovering certain characteristics, then we want you also on this plan so you are aware of some of those nonverbals. So how can a victim or survivor get the courage to escape their environment?
That's a really hard question. And you ask a lot of hard questions, but this one is difficult. I think that it has everything to do with that person and when they're ready to do it. We can't dictate when a survivor is going to be ready to get out of that situation. And so all that I think we can do is support them, give them the means to do it. And I know we're going to talk about that probably a lot throughout the show, but it's all a part of that power and control and allowing them to realize that they have more power than they think. And I think that's what dictates when they're ready to walk out of that situation.
Yeah, and look, I agree with you. A lot of our survivors, we call them survivors. Certain people may be in the phase of a victim right now, but yes, you do have the power. It's all in your power to escape. But some of these victims at the moment in time feel like they can't leave. They feel like they're trapped, that if I leave, they're going to do more harm to me, or some people are in drug environments. So what advice do you have for them that may be watching, or if they know of someone that is stuck in that situation?
So, like I said, I think that having a safety plan in place is extremely important. And one of those things that you can do or that they can start doing is knowing the resources in their local areas, wherever they're situated, whatever places that they frequent, and being able to know those resources, have a support system, and they may have to build it. Because, right now, I could imagine that they feel alone and that there's no one there. But I have lots of stories, even in dealing with domestic violence situations, in which there was a safety plan in place, and it was a life-saving safety plan. And so when you start putting those avenues and resources, where you can go, who you can call, and when you make that final decision and you see a way out, that you make that step and you go for it.
Yeah, I agree. And I know this topic is very powerful because we want to get those people that are suffering and that are being abused the help. And sometimes it's not as easy as we think it is. A lot of people may be watching right now and just saying, why wouldn't you just leave? If you're not comfortable, just leave. But being in those situations have to be a little bit more difficult than we think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not really as easy as a lot of people would think.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't even imagine nor put myself in those shoes, but it's just like mentioned, it's not that easy. And sometimes there is a little bit more of a mental abuse that takes over as well as with the physical abuse.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that takes over to where it makes it very difficult. So let's talk about, I know you just kind of uncovered about safety plan a little earlier. So for any sexual abuse survivor that is trying to escape and seek help and doesn't know what to do, let's talk about what that safety plan could look like. It might be different for every case scenario, every environment, city or state. But the best that we can, what would that safety plan look like?
One of the things that I would start with is, for example, here in Houston, Montgomery County areas, we have women's shelters, and some of them have multiple locations. So, for example, the Houston Area Women's Center, the Montgomery County Women's Shelter, these places already have resources available, and it's kind of a one-stop shop. If let's say they're not in a situation or they're not in a mental place where they are ready to receive that help and take those steps, if they just simply say, you know what, I'm going to go pick up a business card today. I'm going to make a contact. You just simply go there, meet someone that can help you, let them know who you are. And then one day, if you're ever in a bad situation, you can use that contact to help get you out. And those resources, those shelters are there with people who are equipped to help in those dire situations. And so I definitely would say, have a bank or, a number of local places that you can kind of keep on speed dial, or commit that number to memory, because let's be realistic about this situation as well, is that some of these victims, survivors, they don't have access to phones, or their phones are being monitored by their perpetrators, and there's no safe way to make a phone call. And so, they may have to resort to saying, okay, you know what? I need to know the phone number to the local women's shelter so that if I have to run out, I got to have a couple bucks in my pocket so that I can make a phone call and make those calls based it on their memory. Those are the kind of emergency, I think, situations that they're going to be in and the kinds of dynamics that they're going to have to deal with. But you've got to have those plans in place.
Yes, and we're going to definitely try the best that we can. We are working on getting you guys, those viewers in this topic, a website. Now, right now on the screen, we do have a network of help resources. Some of them are local to Houston, Texas, and some of them are more of a national brand type of number. First and foremost, the number one number that everyone knows, which is call 911 if in need of an emergency. If it's not an emergency, like Attorney Rochelle stated, I think that's great, is memory. I know when people are in desperate need of escape, certain things start working and magnified to a different caliber. So your memory is crazy, repetition, all of that good stuff. Those are just plans and ways that we can help people probably get out. Once you escape or someone escapes, then the help is there available, and it's more so easy after escaping. I'm going to uncover a little bit of difficult questions, Attorney Rochelle. So let's talk about a scenario. What if they're not U.S. citizens? I know a lot of non-U.S. citizens, and this goes for speaking foreign languages. This could be Spanish, this could be Chinese, French, it doesn't matter, okay? They may not feel comfortable, or they may feel that there is no trust, and who do I call? Am I going to get deported? All of those things run through their head, with also a language barrier. So talk to us a little bit about what if they're non-U.S. citizens?
So first of all, I think, Madi, this is a great topic. Unfortunately, I think that non-citizens is a very vulnerable class anywhere you're going to go in our country, because oftentimes it's their citizenship that's used against them to keep them from reporting, to keep them from finding shelter and reaching out for help. And so I definitely think that it's important to tell non-citizens, and important for them to know that these resources that we've just listed here during the show, they typically will have someone that speaks different languages that can assist them. And I've had very, very good experience in those situations. I have not had issues with being able to communicate with a survivor because of all the available resources out there. I've had, for example, at the Children's Advocacy Centers, there's a language line, and you can actually reach out and let them know what languages you need. We have had to translate Mandarin, Chinese, all kinds of different languages. And so the resources are out there, and there are people that care about non-citizens and want to make sure that that vulnerable class of people, that they're reached, because the fact that they're non-citizens is used against them. The other thing that I think is important to know is typically on criminal cases, and this is not in every circumstance, and you most definitely should speak to an expert in that area, but there are protections in the United States for immigrants that are eligible for crime victim services to aid them in receiving visas. So, I am upset, and it concerns me that someone would be in a domestic violence situation or a sexual assault happened, and that they're fearful of reporting because they believe that they'll be deported. And I think that's very unfortunate, and the resources are definitely there for them, and I definitely see them as a vulnerable class.
Yeah, and I know currently here, and someone we've already worked with on the show is Agents Against Domestic Violence. It's somewhere locally in Houston as well that helps a lot of women that have been sexually abused. on escaping, on the shelter, and most of them are non-US citizens as well. So there is help around your community. And look, even if you were to call a number that is on the screen right now, someone will guide you in your area and get you the help that is needed. Now, this is a huge network. However, it's a tight family, right? So if you're in Houston and really you need help in New York, they will be able to, because they have a network already in New York. So these numbers do help, even though it might not be in your city. It's worth a try just to get someone on the line and then transfer you a warm transfer on. We will put this contact information in the comment section, so it could be at your fingertips. You can screenshot it. You can always have it on your phone. I think that would be very beneficial. The font is small, but there's just so many numbers, and there's still more numbers that we are missing. So if you are someone that is watching that could give assistance, we really strongly ask that you reach out to us, send us a direct message, because we would love to get the survivors that proper help. Now, Attorney Rochelle, we were just talking about non-U.S. citizens and or residents, but what if the survivor is a child or a minor? 17 years old is still a minor. What would you advise on someone that's under 18?
You know, that presents as a very unique situation depending on the age, right? Because, you know, children aren't carrying around, you know, Blackberries and cell phones and, you know, calendars, and they don't know phone numbers by heart. So I do think that children, again, you know, we have the very vulnerable classes of people that are, you know, obviously going to be in tight situations, bad situations when it comes to sexual assault or domestic violence. And, you know, what I would always caution people to do, the first thing that I would do, and I do it with my own kids, is to educate them. So that one of the first things that you want your kids to know is appropriate and inappropriate touching, appropriate and inappropriate secrets. You know, you have good secrets and bad secrets, right? And we don't keep bad secrets. We keep good secrets. Like, you know, I got a surprise for you. Or, you know, mommy's birthday is coming up and we don't want to tell her what we're doing for her birthday. But when someone comes to you and says, hey, you know, they've done something bad, they've touched you inappropriately, and they say, don't tell mom and dad, that's not the kind of secret that we want our kids to keep. So educating them, I think, is the first step in children being safe. And then once they have that knowledge, they know what to do with it. If they get in those situations, they can then tell an adult. And then you start talking to them about who can we trust? Who do we trust? Do you trust your teachers, your parents, grandma, grandpa, and just building up their network so that they know who to tell. And so, you know, I think it's always going to be about, you know, making sure they have the knowledge. And, you know, you certainly don't want your children learning appropriate or inappropriate, you know, touch or secrets from the perpetrator, because then they dictate how they handle it, who they tell, whether they ever tell at all.
Yeah, I think that's great advice as far as educating your kids. I know, you know, every parent will raise their child their best way. And what is the appropriate age to have that conversation? I know the sooner that you can introduce kind of like those good secrets, bad secrets, it's best, just because it's crazy, because we don't know the world that's out there. We don't know what some people are capable of. We don't even know the human trafficking if you're not educated as an adult. Much less can you teach that to a child.
Right.
So really just knowing how to uncover to the child in a respectful manner, age appropriate, right? To where
Absolutely.
they could recognize that the world out there is a little tainted and there is stuff out there. And so they could recognize it as well.
Right. So, you know, one of the things, and of course I can say, you know, I've been in this area for long enough to have had the experiences kind of cloud how I teach my children and when I teach my children. So I would say my children have probably learned very early on, you know, at probably 3-4 years old. You know, I am teaching them the appropriate word of what to call their private parts. So if they ever have to tell what happened, I know what they're referring to. And of course, these are all very personal choices. So I would never want to dictate how parents teach. But, of course, I have experiences in this area that have kind of clouded that judgment a bit. And so
Right.
I'm biased in how I do that. I'm very, I would say, forward thinking about that. And I tell my kids as early as they're ready to talk about it. Their age and development will dictate a lot of that. So if your children are ready to talk, and this as a parent, mom and dad will know when their kids are ready to understand, okay, this is not an appropriate touch, and talk to them about why, and talk to them about okay, and when you have something like that happens, when they should tell, how they should tell, who they should tell, and educating them, and they're ready if they ever get in that situation. And more than that, that they will know how to avoid those situations as well. And your kid, it kind of builds a trust between you and your kid, because you're protecting them before they ever get in that situation.
Yes, I think that's super important, and I know we can, the best that we can. We're providing as much education right now on how to get help right now, and we kind of uncovered. If you are just a regular survivor, a non-citizen, a child, and the last one that I do want to ask Attorney Rochelle is another vulnerable party. Like, what if the survivor is homeless?
Oh, yeah. So first of all, if anything ever happened to them, law enforcement would have a difficult time locating or even knowing that something has happened. So I certainly would say that in those situations, you should know where the shelters are. Those are the places that are going to provide you with the safe haven that you need. If you don't have a place or a safe, consistent place to live. So I think the shelters in the area are going to be key in that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I just want to kind of now uncover if anyone sees signs of a family member or friend being abused, who are we to call first? Let's talk about who can be a witness, the types of abuse or people that can see the signs of the abuse that is happening. What does that generally look like?
So, sexual assault and sexual abuse is going to be a little bit different. Generally, in my experience, I haven't seen a lot of cases in which there's a witness to the actual act. Now, I have had several cases where it's happened and I've had an eyewitness other than the victim. But in most cases, perpetrators are creating scenarios in which they're going to be able to commit those crimes without anyone else ever seeing or knowing about it. And this is the dynamics of it. This is the scene that they want to create so that there is no way to tell law enforcement or corroborate what that person says. But what I would say is that there still can be witness to it. So, for example, in a situation where someone is being sexually abused, and this is a regular, you can start paying attention to, whether or not that person has been isolated from other people. Are they hiding bruises and marks? Are they being more reserved? You will have to be in tune and pay attention to their demeanor. If they're trying to send you a sign of, when they're in danger. Maybe, it's a spouse or a significant other, and that person is doing it in the home, and you're not allowed to come and visit only at certain hours or only at certain times. Though I would try to pay attention to those types of signs, and definitely let that person know that you're there to support them. And it's really important, in those kinds of situations, if it's not a life or death situation right at that time, and calling the police, remember that your acts can have detrimental effects on them. And so you want them to have an escape route and a plan in place if you ever have to intervene. If it's not, of course, if it's life or death, you want to react to it very quickly. But in a daily scenario, you want to make sure that they're prepared, because sometimes you could be putting them in more danger.
Absolutely. I think that is super important. And we're talking about I mean, teachers get the proper training, coworkers, nurses, strangers, etc. Any of you guys that are watching, you could also be a help or a source of help to someone that is going through someone just by being observant. Another observance that I kind of want to touch base on is, what if some businesses show signs of people being trafficked? What are the steps that someone witnessing should take?
Sure. So, and if I could, Marty, I want to just kind of go back on this other thing that you brought up because you mentioned teachers and nurses. I think it's important to note that all of those people are mandatory reporters. So if they're seeing any signs of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, things like that, especially among children, they're mandated by law to report those things to the Child Protective Services. And then in regard to the businesses, you absolutely can report that. One of the first things that you could do is report it to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And for sure, if you're in the area of Houston, the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance, I think, would be a phenomenal resource. It's a law enforcement agency that branches out to several government agencies, including the FBI, are part of that operation or organization. And you should report. So if you're seeing massage parlors and things like that that are performing inappropriate services, those businesses should be reported.
Yeah, and just kind of touching a little bit base on that, Attorney Rochelle, we're talking massage parlors. We've seen cantinas as well. Any type of and what's some of that signs that you may see that people could recognize, like, okay, I should report this type of behavior?
Right. So, like, for example, if it is a massage parlor and you only see men going in and out at certain times of the day, late hours, if you happen to go to the massage parlor yourself and you see that there are condoms, large amounts of condoms around, or that the massage therapist is offering sexual services to you for money, I definitely would get out of that situation and decline, of course, those services and report it as quickly as possible. One of the biggest things I think is an issue in human trafficking in both the business-related labor and services is the demand. And of course, there are going to be criminals and perpetrators that are going to thrive off of the demand. And if people continue to pay for those services and employ, make sure that those businesses are running, then they're going to keep going. They're going to continue to make money and they're going to grow. And it's a criminal enterprise that's growing. And the moment that we curtail the demand, so we stop people from going to receive those services, that's how you best protect those victims, is curtailing the demand.
Yeah, and I think those are great points that you kind of mentioned. So that way, if you see some of that behavior or something just doesn't seem right, it's best to kind of report those type of businesses. Now, we are talking about human trafficking and sexual abuse. Now, that has a lot of traumatic experience mentally and physically. So what are some specialized services that can treat a survivor with any type of mental care that is needed?
So I do think that first and foremost, I would always recommend a trauma-based or trauma-informed counseling center or counselor, someone that has experience in these types of cases. It's very different from, if you were traumatized in a car accident. While that is bad and it definitely has some PTSD effects, being in a situation like human trafficking, where you're forced to have sex with a number of partners, is extremely traumatic, and everyone processes it differently. One of the things that I've seen is very common in these situations is that people have triggers, and they don't necessarily know when something in their life, in their day-to-day, is going to trigger and remind them of what they went through. And so being able to go to trauma-based counseling and get the help that they need there, they will be trained and taught on how to deal with those triggers, how to respond, how to have more control over what's going on in their head and the mental aspects of what they've gone through. And oftentimes, the survivors don't even realize, it affects everyone differently, sometimes very early on after the events have happened, and sometimes years later. And so being able to know how to cope with that, I think, is key, Madi, and making sure to have the mental health professionals in place. And again, the shelters are going to have those key people. Of course, you can have private counselors and things like that, but I think, if you just start out at a shelter, they're going to be able to make those referrals to you of the counseling centers that you should go to based on your situation.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And this month is Mental Health Awareness Month as well. So we definitely don't want to leave that out of the mix. And we kind of put on the screen some network of help that you can seek, whether that looks like physical, shelters, mental, all that good stuff. All of this helps. D. Miller and Associates is a law firm, so we wanted to kind of uncover the help that you can get out there. And now we're going to uncover the legal help. I think it's twofold. It's important as well. So what legal help, Attorney Rochelle, is available to protect sexual abuse survivors?
Right. So, it depends, right? There's definitely two different avenues, just in a general sense. So there's always the criminal aspect. If they've been sexually assaulted, and they can go report this to the local law enforcement agencies. And then there's the civil side, wherein they can try to receive some monetary compensation for what they've gone through. And then, of course, that varies state to state, but those are the two routes that they can potentially go. Definitely think that it's important for survivors to know the difference between the two.
Yeah, and you definitely have experience in both criminal legal representation and civil legal representation. I want you to explain the difference now. I just want to be clear. Your experience is in the state of Texas. Every state will have different rules, regulations, etc. So I just want to be very clear that anything that we're kind of talking about here would be in the state of Texas. But tell us the difference for those that are watching right now. Legal representation, whether it's criminal or civil, is just as important. But what is the difference between the two?
Sure. So in a criminal case, typically, there's going to be a law enforcement agency that engages the start of an investigation. And then once that investigation is complete, they can bring it to a district or county attorney's office so that they can decide if they're going to accept that case and be able to go forward with it. So in a sense, what would happen then is that a prosecutor would be assigned that case, and they would work that case up. They would handle the negotiations of that case. They would litigate that case if it went to trial, and the results could vary depending on the extent of the sexual assault or the physical injury to that person, or emotional effects of that particular incident. The result could likely be that they would go to jail or prison. If it's a lower level offense or varying degrees of harm to that person, it could be that they get probation. And it would be up to the judge, the prosecutor, and a defense attorney if that perpetrator is represented. And so typically what you'll see is basically an interruption of the perpetrator's freedom, wherein they would go to jail or prison. They would potentially have something on their criminal record. In a civil case, what would happen is that a survivor could decide to retain an attorney, their own personal attorney, to evaluate the liability and damages of their case. That attorney would then decide who are all the culpable parties, if there's one or more than one. And, and this can branch out. It varies, right? So, for example, if you were sexually assaulted in an institution, a school, a college, while at work, or while employing another corporate platform, they may be aligned with the perpetrator and could be potentially held culpable. You could then have that attorney work on trying to get you some sort of a monetary settlement or litigate that case for a monetary settlement. So, simply put, right, criminal could potentially affect the freedom of that perpetrator. Civil could potentially affect the survivor getting some sort of a monetary gain for what happened.
See, and that's great to know the difference. I know what we see, even on television, depicts more so the criminal aspect of things. I think it's very important to know the difference between both. Could a survivor seek justice on both criminal and civil?
They can. Yes. So it's two different avenues, but you can certainly do both. There are two different burdens of proof. So completely different routes for what could potentially be the same case.
Yes, and you've been very blessed, Attorney Rochelle. The first 10 years of your career, you've been blessed to do the criminal side, and now you're blessed to do the civil side, which is awesome. You definitely can bring that knowledge to a survivor as well from both sides. So how do you, Attorney Rochelle Guyton, seek justice for these survivors, which all their stories are very, very different?
Oh, absolutely. All of their stories are different, but powerful. And, I think the thing that I have prided myself in is making sure to listen. We have to be willing to listen what they have to say, to know what they care about. They have been in a situation where the power and control hasn't always been in their hands, if at all, ever. And so being able to give them some of that control back and listen to them and hear what they care about and what they would like to see, and being honest with them. I always say, I cannot always make guarantees and promises of what will happen at the end, but I certainly let them know that I care most about them getting justice for what happened, whether it's on the criminal side or the civil side. And so I definitely would say just being able to listen to them and evaluate their claims and be honest with them about what I think is a good resolution or a reasonable resolution.
I think that's great. And justice for everyone looks very, very different. Like you mentioned, some of them may seek monetary value, and some may be seeking just the point of changing the law, changing the ways that are happening here in their society, in their city, in their state. And that right there is a bigger change that can happen within our society, is changing the law and how people are thinking nowadays, which I think is super powerful. So how can a survivor feel safe in seeking legal help and that their abuser will not come to find them again?
That is a tough question. Again, it's not something that I can guarantee and promise a survivor. But what I would most definitely caution them is that they have to take the same steps that they would have taken without the legal help. So, for example, if they decide to escape a situation, they get a new address, they get a new phone number, and they have this new support system. They have to keep those things private, only provide that information to people that they know that they can trust. You still have to be smart. I always say, get a lawyer so you can leave common sense at the door. You still have to use your common sense. I certainly would tell them to protect their information and continue to do that. If we have avenues in which, for example, if there's also a criminal case pending, sometimes we can get protective orders from the court. We can start civil actions to get protective orders in place. And that's going to vary depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. But there are some avenues, but they certainly should still be smart about their situation. One of the things that I don't think that I mentioned earlier that I think is a great idea is if they've got one person that they trust, a friend their mom, a sister, anybody. Make up a code word. You can have a code word, and whatever that word is, it could be something silly. It could be banana. Code word is banana. And if I ever text you or call you and say this word, I need you to call 911. Those are the measures and the steps that I want survivors to put in place, because their life is worth it, and it just takes a little bit of time to develop that safety plan, and you put it in place and you let those people know. If I send you a text that says banana, know that I'm in trouble and I need your help.
I think that is a great suggestion for any family member or family or even friends that is watching right now, because that could be to where even being in an Uber, if you be sexually assaulted, sending that text word and you just really can't pick up the phone. I think that is a great sense of advice that you've given, Attorney Rochelle, because at the end of the day, I think you mentioned it, your life is definitely worth it. A lot of survivors always hesitate on seeking justice or going to the legal route due to what if my perpetrator comes back after me, or what if they come find me. There's always that fear that can always present itself, but it's great to hear that there is measures that could be taken to protect the individual.
And Madi, it's not always a sense of fear. Sometimes they don't come forward because of love, and they care about this person and they don't want to hurt that person, or this is the father of my kids and I don't want to put the father of my kids in that situation. Definitely, I would say survivors are in a very tough situation. They have to evaluate what they're going through on a case-by-case basis and make decisions that are right for them. But just to kind of add a little bit of comfort in that, if they did decide to go forward, is that, in a situation where there are kids, their kids are watching and their kids see this and what's going on. And so I definitely would want someone to consider whether or not that's a good situation for their children to be in. But I understand the conflict, and my heart always goes out, because they're protecting people that they love. And they are still in their dangerous situation trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we mentioned earlier in the show, it may seem easy to escape, but some situations may be a little bit harder than we think. So let's talk about, this episode is about seeking help. So what are some organizations, Attorney Rochelle, that offer help and resources to sexual abuse survivors that you may know just at the top of your head? We will load it again on the screen.
Absolutely. So one of the organizations is Redeem Ministries. I'm actually on the board of Redeem Ministries, and they offer assistance to adult survivors. Additionally, the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance is a law enforcement combined operation amongst several law enforcement agencies, and they work on all different types of investigations involving human trafficking and organized crime. Reaching out to those organizations, I think, would be a great resource for survivors. Additionally, the Human Trafficking Hotline, YMCA International. I can think of several. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Houston Rescue and Restore Coalition. I think in that organization, there are about 50 different local organizations within the Houston area that are a part of that coalition. And everybody at the heart of that organization is going to be to rescue human trafficking survivors. There are so many different resources out there. This is going to sound very cliche and silly, but it really is just a Google search away. If you have access to the internet, I'd say that's the easiest thing that you can do to find local resources. And if nothing else, absolutely nothing else is available to you, the hospitals can help you report. So if you go there, you're in a dire situation, you go to the hospital. Of course, if it's life or death in a very emergency situation, you call 911. But I am, this has been a long time coming, for sexual assault and human trafficking to have the number of resources that are now available. I definitely think that there is some room for growth, but very proud of organizations that are coming together, churches and things like that are coming forward to assist survivors.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of help out there, and it's really just Googling or finding that right help. So we want to provide you guys with those. It's in the comment section already. So those numbers that you've already mentioned, if it helps at all, we definitely want to help any of you guys that are watching, or if you guys are just educating to potentially help anybody out there, that's definitely the route we want to go. So I just want to bring up, may we remember that this month, May, is Mental Health Awareness Month. We want to remind everyone that you're not alone in your struggle and to reach out for help, especially for sexual abuse survivors. Mental health is something very serious in this community and in our society. So we want to support anyone that you kind of see going through something. Just being there for them and just giving them a call goes a long way, especially to our sexual abuse survivors. Now, Attorney Rochelle Guyton, it's coming close to the end of the show, and I always ask you if you want to give our viewers any type of advice or any type of quotes that you want to kind of let them know, and in gear to our next episode as well. What would you leave our viewers with? One more quote.
Just not necessarily, a quote from anyone, but, and I think I said this in the last show, with this pandemic still going on, I think that it is important for all of us to still be mindful of people who are locked in place right now with their perpetrators, or, more so now if they are in a situation where they've lost employment or the perpetrator has lost employment. There are going to be very dire situations, and it could, not only enhance the abuse that's happening, but also the mental health aspect of it, and bring on, depression and things like that can definitely be harmful to them, their kids, whoever is around. And of course, I have a bleeding heart for all, anyone in that kind of situation. And I hope that our community is reaching out to those people, reach out to your neighbors. You haven't seen your neighbor come out in a while. I mean, knock on the door, and bring them some cookies, something to make sure that there's still some life in that house, and let that person know that there's somebody that cares about them, that noticed, hey, I haven't seen your car pull out the driveway in a while. And just, taking care of each other. I think that's what we have to do right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a great suggestion, especially during the times right now where we have to stay at home and it's advised to stay within your four walls. It's even easier for the perpetrator to be doing what they're doing because they don't have to come out into the world. They get to stay in their house, and so it's almost easier. So if you are paying attention, I think that's a great suggestion to make it a little bit hard on them and to let them know that you are being a friend and kind of watching the surroundings. I think that's very important. So definitely want to be there for our neighbors. I guess the biggest takeaway from this show is being observant. So looking and seeing what are some of those signs, whether it's for minors, for children, for women, for non-citizens, you name it, just being a little bit more aware of the surroundings, because you as well, the viewer, the person that's watching right now, can also help someone that is in need, that is being sexually abused right now. Attorney Rochelle Guyton, I want to thank you again for coming on today's show, our series, a special of sexual abuse, human trafficking, and discussing different types of safety and help for sexual abuse survivors. Be sure to tune into next episode, which is Meet Our Team. We will be having our team here the best way that we can in the quarantine environment, right? But we're going to be meeting the team, so that way you get to meet not just the attorneys, but also the team that you would be speaking to on the phone if you do have a legal civil case with us. Attorney Rochelle Guyton will continuously educate the community on sexual abuse and human trafficking to introduce change. So I want to thank you again, all of you guys, for tuning in and sharing this special show. The more you share the show, the more we get to educate our community. Being a part of the conversation by liking, commenting the video, and most importantly, sharing it. So I want to thank all of you guys for being on episode 2. Until next time, Talk to Me Tuesday with your host, Mari B. Bye.
Human trafficking is a worldwide epidemic. Awareness, accountability, and action will be crucial to saving our communities. The wrath of human trafficking crosses gender lines, ethnicities, and all age groups. Traffickers and abusers want you to feel as though you are alone, hopeless, worthless, but you are fighters. You are strong. You are survivors. You are worth everything. You are not alone. Let us give you a voice. A simple phone call will get you the help that you deserve, the help that you need. We will ensure that we are with you every step of the way. The team of attorneys at D. Miller & Associates, PLLC, is ready to fight for you, to change your life, to change the community, and to change the world. Let us be your voice. Give us a call at 713-850-8600.